You're listening to Northwood Church Matters, a podcast of Northwood Church in Evansville, Indiana, where we discuss why the local church matters and things that matter to the local church. I'm your host, Matt Higgins. Hey, welcome back to the Northwood Church Matters podcast. I'm excited to be here talking 7 churches of Revelation tonight with my friend Ivan McDonald.
Hey, guys.
And Carrie Bochting.
Hello.
And Bobby Pell.
Yep.
We are almost done. We're at the second to last church, the Church of Smyrna, in reverse order.
Second to first.
Second to first? The second. Whatever it is. We're almost done. We can call it that. So, intro question, funsy question. We're talking about holding fast to things tonight. And so, what is something that you do or like that the younger generation would find tremendously uncool? And I'll go first. Your answer is everything, right? But the thing off the top of my head is I love the rock band Creed. I love me some Creed. Mark Tremonti is one of the greatest guitar players of this generation. I'm going to go see Creed this summer. I'm going to get my Scott Stapp on, and I'm ready. I'm ready this summer to rock out to some Creed. And my daughter would think that's just tremendously uncool.
Is this similar to the song Creed?
No. This is a...
I just want you to recognize I knew that was not the same.
Oh.
Okay, because everyone in the room thought, Bobby really doesn't know.
Bobby doesn't know.
Bobby really doesn't know.
Yeah.
But that shows you where I am on the topic.
Yeah. Towards the Imperials, the cathedral.
Preach.
Ivan, what is something that you like or something you do that the younger generation would find uncool?
I don't know that I'm that far from the youngers, really. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure my guys at work could probably tell you a whole list of things, but I don't know. Off the top of my head, I think they're a little weird, to be honest, but that's just...
The younger generation that you are a part of?
Are you millennial or Gen Z?
I'm technically millennial.
Okay, so there are...
Yeah.
So you're on the back end of millennial.
Back end of millennial, yeah.
How old are you, Ivan? Let's just go ahead and let's out you. I don't mind.
28.
All right. How old are you, Carrie?
38.
38. 10-year difference. 28, 38. You're in your 40s.
50.
You're 50.
I'm 50.
That's right. I remember that.
Yeah,
you just
50.
turned 50.
Yeah. There's stickers all over
There's stickers all over here. It says you are 50.
And Bobby, you're?
I'm 54, turned 55 this year.
Yeah. Carrie, what about you? What do your kids think is uncool?
Well, I am every single... So I have a dad zinger for everything. But the thing that came to my mind when you said there's something that scratches an itch, mowing the lawn.
You enjoy it.
You enjoy it.
Nothing more therapeutic.
Yeah.
Are you like white tennis shoes mowing the lawn?
No. I have a special set of tennis shoes for mowing the lawn, but they're not like the classical New Balance white ones.
Special pair of shoes for mowing.
I do. They're like outdoor shoes. They even have a steel toe on them. That's my thing. I feel like I'm the oldest guy in the room.
As you should.
I think we need to post a shot of your shoes in the show notes.
I'd just like to have your wife, Katie, take a picture of you mowing the grass.
In your special shoes.
In the special shoes.
Yeah.
So this will totally unsurprise Matt Higgins, but all of my musical selections will completely disappoint the next generation.
Not Creed.
Not Creed, I was told of someone today downstairs who supposedly is the new up-and-coming person.
Yeah, we were talking about Taylor Swift is declining in popularity.
Oh.
Yeah, and so it's ladies like Chaperone and Charlie XCX and Sabrina Carpenter, and there's a new generation of...
And my response to all of that was, it's like y'all are speaking a totally different language to me. I have no clue
If it makes you feel any better, when he mentioned those 4 or 5 names, I've not heard of a single one of those somehow.
Yeah, no, I totally know nothing about any of that.
I'll bring Gwen Higgins on the podcast, and she can tell us all about all of those people.
Yeah. I'm grateful to say that this is the Northwood Church Matters podcast.
We're not going to evaluate the rise and fall of Midwest Princess by Chaperone. Yeah. Hey, so tonight we're talking about the Church of Smyrna. So let's ask some questions, and we'll give some answers.
Matt, do you want to start by reading that chapter and section?
I do, yeah. So this is kind of the shortest one, I believe, of all the 7 letters. It starts in chapter 2, verse 8. And to the angel of the church of Smyrna write, the words of the first and the last who died and came to life. I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich, and the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death.
What do we know about the city of Smyrna?
So we know that this was a beautiful city. It had like an excellent harbor and road network. It was second only to Ephesus in trade of all these cities. A very proud city. They minted coins that were inscribed first of Asia in beauty and size. And so they loved their city. But it was also a hostile place for Christianity for two different ways. One, that there was a strong allegiance to Rome and strong support of emperor worship there. And one story is that as a reward to strong loyalty to Caesar, Smyrna beat out 11 other cities to build the first temple to honor Tiberius Caesar. And so there's a lot of emperor worship centered around Smyrna. But then there was a large Jewish population there, and that Jewish population also opposed the Christians there as well. In terms of this church, this is probably, if you're going to name your church, this is probably one of the names to name your church after versus...
I've preached in one.
Yeah, Smyrna Baptist Church. This is a worthy... Smyrna was close to Ephesus, and so there's some theorization that this may have been a church plant from the Church of Ephesus, that Paul and some of his folks that were there went out and preached the gospel to different towns surrounding in the area. So this may have been an outgrowth of the ministry of Ephesus.
It was also just a couple of other pieces. It was the birthplace of Homer, who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Not Homer Simpson.
Not Homer Simpson. It was all throughout its history. It sort of had a long and eventful history of persecution of believers. Polycarp was from Smyrna and died in Smyrna in 168 AD. It's interesting, on the same hill that Polycarp died, there were two other events in the generation that followed Polycarp. One event that 1,500 believers at one time died, and another event of 800 believers that died, all on the same hill that Polycarp was killed. And so the place of Smyrna itself is still there. It is not called Smyrna any longer. It is certainly a place that if you go on a trip to visit the biblical places of the New Testament, they can take you there. It is a part of Turkey. I think it's called Izmir now, Izmir.
If anybody wants kind of some extra history, you can find a writing that's extra biblical called The Martyrdom of Polycarp online, which is the story of how the Romans tortured Polycarp and other Christians and how Polycarp died. And so it gives some character and some flavor to what living as a first century Christian would have been like in the Roman Empire. So highly recommend reading it. It's not a long read.
In Revelation 2:8, Jesus refers to himself as the first and the last who died and came to life again. Why is this particular description meaningful for the believers in Smyrna facing persecution?
Well, it seems like many of the Christians, even in this time, were dying. And so the resurrection power of Jesus would have been really powerful, that Christ suffered brutally and was resurrected again to life, and the church is on the same path. The arc and the trajectory of the church is the same trajectory as Jesus. We die, but we're risen again. And as it says in Philippians 1:21, to live is Christ and to die is gain. And so if we live with the hope of Jesus, if we die, we go to be with Jesus. And Paul said he didn't know which situation he preferred. And I think that's a good philosophy to have. If we live, then we live with the hope of Jesus. And if we die and go be with Jesus, which is great.
Yeah. So the very end of Revelation, which all of this is connected, and we have to understand that as they're hearing a specific message for their church, they're also hearing the broader message of Revelation. And so in Revelation 22, it says in verse 12 and 13, it says, "Behold, I am coming soon, bringing my recompense with me to repay each one for what he has done." It's very clear in verse 12 that he's talking about Jesus. Jesus is coming soon. He's going to bring judgment for all who are in front of him. But then it says, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end." And so part of the thing that I think is really important in Revelation 2, whenever he describes this first and last, is later he sort of puts his own little signature on it at the end that says, in case you're curious, this first and last really is Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a message from Jesus. And so just knowing that, if you're the church of Smyrna and you're hearing the message is clearly a message from Jesus. So if I got up on Sunday and I read a message from the president, some people in the room would stand up and really listen, and some people in the room would not. The governor, the mayor. But it's interesting to me that we don't recognize that the message of the word, I'm not talking about the sermon, how it's shaped, but the message of the word is a message from Jesus. And we should see it as such. And in this particular church's case, it was a very specific message for them.
So some similarities here, Smyrna to Philadelphia, in the sense that there's not really any bad said about the church. What good things does Jesus say about this church?
Well, it starts off in verse 9 where Jesus says, I know your tribulations and your poverty. And so one thing is that Jesus sees. And so it's not like Jesus has a blindfold in heaven and he just can't see what's going on, or the world is out of control and he just has no authority over it. Jesus sees all this stuff. He sees hardship. And that's encouraging for us as believers today, that Jesus never has a moment where he's completely blindfolded and he doesn't see the hardship that's going on with us. But in the midst of this, the church is going to face real economic hardship as a result of their beliefs. This poverty is likely resulting from the fact that they are Christians. And so they're facing discrimination from the Roman population. They're facing discrimination from the Jewish population, where they can work, what jobs they can have. And so they really are suffering from an income level and from a poverty level just based on their beliefs. We've talked about this before in the series, that we saw this in Ecuador in terms of towns where people couldn't gain economic employment based on their religious belief. But I also want to point out that what the letter does not say, and Jesus doesn't say that he will stop their affliction or stop their poverty. In fact, later on, it says that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. The number 10 in Revelation is often a number of a long duration of time. And so not only are they going to suffer, they're going to suffer for a long time. And you think about the story that Bobby talked about of Polycarp and then many other martyrdoms to go. They really do suffer there for a while. But it is hopeful that Jesus does see their poverty, but following Christ does not necessarily mean easiness or luxury of lifestyle. But the good thing is they're holding on to the faith, and Jesus has nothing negative to say about this church.
Can I ask potentially an odd question?
Yeah.
When I read this, I don't read that he says anything negative, but I'm not sure he says anything positive. Verse 9, I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich. I know the slander of those who say they're Jews or not, but are a synagogue of Satan. That's verse 9. Verse 10, do not fear what you're about to suffer. The devil's about to throw some of you into prison that you would be tested. For 10 days you'll have tribulation. Be faithful to death, and I'll give you the crown of life. Most of this really is
neutral. Yeah.
It's really, let me tell you, there's some stuff that's coming to y'all, Church of Smyrna. Batten down the hatches, baby.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, if you would, a part of this is God's grace to say, the closest we can get to really say there's something good is I know. The
God
Lord
sees.
knows.
Yeah.
He sees.
Yeah.
That's
he
right.
sees.
And there's a touch of encouragement of enduring. Later half of 10, be faithful unto death, and I'll give you the crown of life.
Yeah, I guess you could read that one of two ways. One is be faithful for what you're about to experience, or be faithful as you have been. But, most of this really is the Lord pushing the church to do what ought to be. And I just found that as because most of these, all 7 churches, you have sort of a report card.
Yeah. Good job. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, I just thought that was a little.
Yeah. I think maybe there's a sense of they are holding on.
Yes.
And they're hoping for this to end.
Yes.
And so Jesus is challenging that notion that attaboy, you've been at this for a couple months or a couple years, and this is all about to go smoothly. Well, nope, wrong.
Right.
It kind of echoes a lot of the believers in later on in the letter. Like, how long are we going to suffer?
Right.
Well, Jesus gives some bad news.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So how can we reconcile material poverty with spiritual wealth? What implications does this have for contemporary believers?
Well, I think that one thing it tells us is that our poverty or our wealth has no connection to our faithfulness to God. That one of the big ideas of the book of Job is that material circumstances is not necessarily connected to our personal holiness. This devastating circumstance happens to Job, and likely his wife and then all of his friends gather around and say, look, this happened because you've done something wrong, that you've obviously sinned in some way, and then therefore the Lord is punishing you and cursing you for that. And justifiably, Job keeps on saying, no, pretty sure I haven't done anything worthy of this happening. It's just circumstance. And Job comes back later on in the letter and says, look, there's all these awful people that have great material gain and material wealth. Just because you are a good person doesn't mean you're going to be wealthy. And just because you're a bad person doesn't mean that you're going to live in abject poverty. And this is very different from prosperity preaching or the prosperity gospel.
Yep.
And you hear iterations of this, like, if you just have enough faith, if you just believe, and if you just trust in God, then you'll be materially wealthy. And it's just not a true principle. I think there's a couple errors in Christian thinking. One is that there's an error in thinking that all Christians should strive for material poverty. The Bible tells us to work hard in this life and to take care of our families. We don't all need to be living in abject poverty or being Rich Mullins traveling around the country with one outfit. I think sometimes we make too much of a thing in the church about being holy and poor.
Yep.
But then the other side of it, that material wealth is not necessarily evil. If we view wealth from a position of stewardship, which is that God gives us stuff, then wealth can be a very powerful tool for the advancement of the gospel. That if somebody is wealthy, I mean, when I was growing up, we had the owner of like one of the largest trucking companies in the country as a part of our church. And the amount that that guy gave to the church and gave to ministry and gave to the gospel was just amazing. And so it was a case of he was stewarding what God has given him well. And this is not a guy that went out there with the goal of becoming a millionaire, but by hard work and God's grace, he did. And so he did good things with it. We should note that wealth can be a powerful idol in people's lives, but it's not necessarily evil.
Right.
That you can be wealthy and be a good steward of God's money. We know plenty of people like that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So part of the thing that I think is important for us to catch is that the Bible gives very clear dangers to wealth, but just because there's a danger doesn't mean you have to fall to the temptation of the danger. So there are fewer dangers to poverty spiritually than what there is to wealth. But once again, just because you have money doesn't mean that you have received that money from poor reasons. You could have just simply been a hard worker. The Lord could have simply blessed you. Solomon was the wealthiest person who ever lived. Abraham was wealthy. We can go through multiple examples of people in the scripture who are wealthy. Every person, David was wealthy. There are all kinds of people who were wealthy in scripture. Wealth is not in and of itself the problem. I will say this from a spiritual perspective, though. If you go to Jacobsville and you go knocking on doors, and you go to McCutcheonville and you go knocking on doors, Jacobsville is going to be much more spiritually open than McCutcheonville. Oftentimes where there is financial poverty, there is spiritual openness. That is something that you will find in every community around the world. Where there is financial poverty, there is often spiritual openness. And I believe that that is part of what is happening here. In effect, Jesus is saying, you are struggling with poverty. And then he says, but you're rich. You have invested in the right things. Now, once again, I think what Matt is saying is 100% true. Just because you have financial resources does not mean that you can't invest in right things spiritually.
Yeah. And I wonder here, and I don't know this for certain, whether Jesus is correcting their point of view.
Yes.
Like whether there's a jealousy that they're being persecuted and they want to be.
Yeah, that's right. Why can't we be better off than what we are?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's how I've read it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's as if he's saying, lift your head.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay.
Yeah. Store up your treasures in heaven.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so I say this with our church is much closer to McCutcheonville than we are Jacobsville. And I would just say, recognizing the danger is right. But just because there's a danger does not mean that you have to go touch the electricity. The warnings in Scripture are exactly that. Take them seriously as the warnings that they are. They're there because many people have failed to heed the warning.
Yeah. I think one personal note from me is I've been really thinking over the past couple months about the whole storing up your treasures in heaven and having too many possessions and things like that. And I've behind the scenes, and I haven't been bragging about this. I'm a comic book collector, and I've been selling off a good portion of my collection behind the scenes because I feel like I just have too much junk. And the amount of liberation that it's had on me is just powerful because there's almost sometimes the feeling of the guy with the multiple barns in the parable. It's like, I've got to build another barn to protect this stuff. And just letting go of that stuff has just been a great spiritual exercise in my life. And so that's been a good thing going on right now.
Thanks for tuning in to the Northwood Church Matters Podcast. If you'd like to find out more about Northwood Church, you can visit us at our website, www.northwoodschurch.org. Again, that's www.northwoodschurch.org.